Hello everyone, welcome to my Season 14 guide to warding and jungle tracking for mid lane. I'm going to timestamp all the different things I'll talk about in the description, so feel free to jump around. But mainly what I'm going to talk about is obviously the map changes themselves and how that kind of affects you. I'll talk about specifically where to place your yellow wards, where to place your pink wards, and also talk about the changes to jungle tracking this season. There aren't a ton of changes to that, but it's still worth talking about. So first thing, the mid lane changes themselves. Well, there's a couple. The bushes got pushed further back, which in theory means you're a bit more difficult to gank because there is more distance to cover. And I think especially if you're hugging correctly, that's still the case. You know, like if you're hugging bot side and you're hugging away from the enemy jungler like their top side, it is pretty much impossible for them to gank, right? Like that is just too much distance to cover. That being said, I guess something I saw a lot that I think is kind of not correct is that if you're hugging in the middle of the lane, like if you're just standing in the middle of the lane, that you're actually safer than you were before, and that is true, but I think standing in the middle of the lane is still pretty unsafe. Like, despite the additional distance here, you know, you're still gankable from behind, obviously. And I honestly think a lot of champs can, especially with a flash, gank you from here still, if you're hugging in the middle of the lane. So in general, as mid lane, you always want to be hugging to one side, like whether that's top side or bot side. Standing in the middle of the lane is kind of like a last resort, or I don't know, if you think you're really ungankable, you already see their jungler, then obviously the positioning doesn't really matter a whole lot. But yeah, I'd really recommend making sure you're at any one time kind of hugging to one of those sides. So it might be you're playing in bot side like this, or it might be you're playing in top side like this. So for our yellow trinket placement, it depends on a couple different things. And the first one is if you have a pink ward on the map or not. So one of the important things for just vision in general in League of Legends is that pink wards can be used to allow you to push your yellow wards forward, and also that the yellow wards protect your pink wards. They kind of work together. So if you don't have a pink ward, it's really difficult to get a really deep ward. Like let's say, for example, that we had a lot of prio and we came and warded this bush. This is quite hard to do without a pink ward and not something you're going to do early in the game, because the problem is it just leaves so much of this area vulnerable. Now, if you had a pink ward in, I don't know, one of these positions, this is a bit more viable because you just have this area controlled. You're not actually worried about, you know, like hugging in this area and thinking you're safe because of this ward, but then just getting randomly ganked through somewhere like here, right? That's not going to be a thing. So given that in the early game we won't have a pink ward, there's going to be a couple different spots that we can use our ward. So obviously this depends a little bit on where the jungle starts, and I'll talk about that when I get to jungle tracking. But pretty much it's going to be that you want to shallow ward one of the rivers, or you can ward the raptors. If you're really lazy, you can just ward this bush. Personally, I think warding this bush is not actually that great. And I'll show you why. So if you don't have much time, right, and like you're just laning mid, you want to get a really like shallow ward, you can quickly come and just ward, say, this bush, right? As you can see, this doesn't actually give you a very large response time. It gives you like, you know, just a little bit of vision. It's better than nothing, right? Like if you think about it, you've got like this, and then maybe this here before the enemy jungler gets to you. It might be enough, depending on what kind of ganking combo you're against. But the thing is, you can get a lot more vision control by just being a little less lazy and warding a little further out. So like if you just take 1 second longer and you come ward at the end of this thing here, so if you drop a ward, say like right here, this will protect us still from pretty much any gank that comes from this side, while also giving us much more time to respond to any gank that's coming around here. So I really like warding the kind of ends of these little walls here. If you are going to ward this bush, it is better if you can ward in the middle at kind of the very end of it. So if you ward like here, right, you kind of saw that there wasn't much vision to it. If you ward like at the very edge at the top, it does show a little bit around this corner right there. The timing, or not the timing, the positioning is not super precise, so you could come try and practice too if you really want to, you know, get good at it. But honestly, like I'm pretty sure as long as the ward is like anywhere around like here, it's pretty much fine. Basically what I'm saying is just don't place it too close to the wall that it wouldn't like show around the corner, and don't place it so far away from the wall that it wouldn't show. So those are going to be your most common spots, I guess, for warding in the early game. Is it's just going to be either in this bush, slightly further out here. You can also just ward the middle of the river. Like if you don't need as much response time from here, maybe you're really scared about the enemy jungler jumping over a wall, then it can be good just to ward out in the middle of the river. Because let's say, I don't know, Nidalee jumps this wall, comes over here and ganks through there. Possibly you would miss that if you had the ward here, but honestly it's very unlikely. But yeah, basically one of those spots, either at the end of the wall, in the middle, or at the top middle of this bush. Now, another way you might use your trinket in the very early game is warding raptors at level 1. So if you're a champ that gets pushed in and isn't going to get priority anyway, it can be a good idea to, at maybe like 125, just come walk up here and just drop a ward right about here. So what this will do is this will tell you when the enemy jungler is doing raptors, It's not going to protect you so much, but because you're losing priority and because you're getting pushed in, it shouldn't really matter. Like you'll be laning kind of back here. Like let's say you're playing a Kali versus Cinder or something. You know, you're laning back here and you're not worried about getting ganked anyway. So you might as well just place a ward because otherwise your trinkets are going to stack up and you're not really going to be able to do anything with them anyway because, you know, you don't have any priority to actually place a ward. So I guess to make it very simple, if you're blue side and you're warding top side with your trinket, you're pretty much going to want to ward either like this spot here or you're going to want to ward this spot here early. If you're then playing blue side and you want to ward bot side, most likely you will just ward out in the river like this. If you're extremely greedy, you could, not even greedy. It's like if you have the time, I guess you can come out and ward something like this. This is quite a good ward. It just takes a lot of time, and personally, I find I don't have that much time in the early game to do something like that. But it is a really good ward if you can get that down. And obviously, if it's the other way around and you're on the red side here, then you can do the same thing. You can walk in the top river, either ward the middle of the river, or you can ward this bush here. Or alternatively, if you're on the bot side, you know, you might want to ward the middle of this river or ward at the end of this wall. So that's basically going to be your yellow trinkets for the early game. And we'll come back to yellow trinkets in a bit after I talk about pink wards and where we can place our yellow wards a bit further in. Now we're going to talk about pink wards. And in my opinion, this is one of the most nerfed and most frustrating parts of mid lane this season. So previously, you had this bush in the middle of the river that you could pink. If you pinked it, you know, it's something you could defend really easily. And also it gave you a lot more control. Like this ward, or this wall, excuse me, wasn't there. So this would give you a pretty good response time to pretty much any gank that came from this side of the map. And the reason having just a pink ward protect you is important is because there will be times in the game where you don't have a trinket up. And so then you would just be reliant on having a pink ward to defend you, right? There are going to be times where you don't have your trinket. One, because of the cooldown. And two, because people might sweep it or pink it out. You know, like if they pink up here and you lose your trinket up here, that can be a really big problem. So the issue with pink wards now is that there's only really a couple spots to put them. If you want to put them in a place that kind of benefits your team a little more, like let's say you're playing blue side and you want to do something like this. Like the good thing about this is that it you know, gives you a lot of control around the void grubs. It allows contesting for scuttle and stuff really easily. The problem with this is that you are reliant on having a yellow trinket up to actually protect you here, because this doesn't protect you from any ganks if they come through here. So you could come in like yellow trinket up here, which is fine. You know, as we said before, using your pinks to move your yellows forward is good. But the problem with this is the moment this becomes cleared, or the moment this gets, or it just expires, you're suddenly extremely vulnerable again. So in my opinion, at least on blue side, putting the pink in this location is actually pretty much non-viable because, again, like it's not unrealistic that this ward will just be swept or expired, and then you're just going to be left like extremely vulnerable. So, in my opinion, pretty much the only place to put a pink, if you're on blue side and you want to ward top side, is actually just to ward the top middle of this bush, like we did with our yellow wards earlier in the game. And that's because at least this way, if this ward expires, we'll still be able to see around the corner. I guess I can't get rid of this ward. Maybe if I just speed up the time a little bit, just get rid of this ward. You'll still be able to see a little bit around the corner if you place it in the right spot. And it's like, you know, at least this way, even if your yellow expires, you're still going to have some control. You're not going to be vulnerable to getting ganks through here, at least not as vulnerable as if you'd pink there. So this kind of sucks, because this means, again, like if you're blue side and you want to pink top side, your only pink ward position that's viable is an extremely shallow and honestly just not that useful pink. Like I used to kind of advise against pinking this bush because it only really helped you and it didn't even help you that much. So I'm not really a fan of that. Now, if you're on blue side and you want to pink bot side, that's a little bit better because, again, we can come down and we can pink this bush. This feels a lot better because, you know, let's say we're landing on blue side. This will give us control. It will protect us against pretty much any gank path, right? Like if we're blue side, it's very unlikely the enemy jungler comes all the way around here to gank you or like hops this wall without being seen. It's very unlikely. So on this side, pink's is a lot better. And same if you're playing the red side. If you're playing red side, your pink can be placed in this position. And you know, you're probably not worried about getting ganked from behind. And this is like a lot more valuable. So it does depend a little bit, you know, on where you want to pink. But in general, if you have the luxury, I suppose, of warding like in this bush on whichever side you're on. So like if you're red side warding this top side bush, or if you're blue side warding this bot side bush with a pink, that's generally better. If you can't though, and you just have to ward a side bush, then what you want to do is, again, like ward kind of the top middle of this bush. And then you probably, if you can, set up a yellow ward a little bit deeper in. So coming back to the yellow trinkets for a moment, if you do have pinks down, we can place these yellow trinkets much further in. So if we have this area covered, you know, we could easily yellow trinket up here and that would be fine. If we do have like a more aggressive ward in this bush, we can come, say, and yellow trinket up here. And this gives you much better control. in general, you also do want to place your yellow trinket on the side with your pink ward, because that just gives you more control. Like if you, it's generally not as good to shallow ward two sides. So let's say, for example, we, I don't know, warded here and then like warded here. That gives you kind of shallow vision on both sides, which isn't awful, but it's almost always better to have like a more solidified control on one side of the map. So that's basically it for the pink wards and yellow wards. The TLDR for the early game at least is that pinks, depending on which side you're warding, need to either go in this bush if you're in this bush if you're on blue side, or you can go in this bush if you're on blue side wanting to ward bot side, or vice versa for the red side. And then yellow trinkets will have to be shallow in the early game, but once you've got pinks down, they can afford to be a little bit further in. So I also want to talk about jungle tracking, because it's a pretty simple method you can use in the early game that will keep you safe from most jungle ganks, and also obviously knowing where the enemy jungler is will impact your warding very heavily. So at level 1, one of the most important things for you to do is to find out where the enemy jungle started. And the way to do that is pretty much just to check who leached. So most of the time, like, one side of the enemy's map, either their top laner or their bot lane, is going to be late to lane. And that's going to be because they're leeching. So normally, if you're looking at the map at around like 140, 145, one side of the map will be in lane and one side will not. And that's going to inform your decision on whether the jungle started bot side or top side. If you didn't get this information, they probably solo started either red or raptors, and the main reason for that is because solo starting red can be common for looking for a 3 camp, so it could be like, you know, starting red and 3 camping top, or on the other side it could be like starting red and 3 camping bot. Alternatively, like starting raptors is pretty common. There's a lot of junglers that have enough AoE to do this at level 1, and that allows like both sides to start in lane, and that's probably the most difficult path to play against, because you don't for sure know that they started raptors. But generally, like if they solo start, you can probably guess with reasonably high certainty that they started on their red side somewhere. That's kind of important to know. And the reason you need to find out where the enemy jungle starts is because that will inform where your first ward, second ward, and where your hugging is going to go. So let's say the enemy jungler starts topside. Basically, there's a couple of things they can do. They can either do something like red Raptors Krugs top, they could do red Krugs Raptors mid, or they might just do like red Raptors bot side. You know, basically, whatever path they do, these are lots of different things they can do. Whichever one they do, they can't really be mid from bot side any like early or reasonable time in the game. Basically what can happen is that like as long as you're hugging to this side, so if the enemy jungler starts top, as long as you hug bot side, there's no way they can like come gank you from here, and by the time they're over here you should have placed a ward. So generally the way to do it is to place a ward on the opposite side of where the jungle starts at around 230. That's like a good time to remember, and makes it pretty simple, but honestly it can be any time from like 215 to probably about like 240 at the latest. And that'll keep you safe. That means that, like, again, any kind of gank that they would do from mid from top side, you'll be hugging the bot side, so they won't be able to get you. And then any gank that comes from bot side, you should have a ward down in time. Obviously, this map that we're looking at here is the old map, so take that with a grain of salt, but mostly it's just going to be the same warding positions. So after that, you know, the jungler is going to be bot side for a while, and then at some point they're going to recall and go back to top side. This ward here that you place in the early game, depending on when you place it, if you place it at 230, it'll expire at 4 minutes. It lasts for 90 seconds, and that's about when you get your second trinket. So what you want to do is, at around 4 minutes, you want to swap back to the original side the jungler started on, and then drop a ward here at around 4 minutes. And that's going to mean that for that first kind of like 4 to maybe like 5.5 minutes of the game, you should be completely safe from the jungler as long as you place your wards in the right position, and as long as you're hugging to your wards. Obviously, you do need to find out where the enemy jungle starts, and if you're not sure where the enemy jungle starts, then you should probably just place a ward and hug to it, and that's going to be good most of the time. But yeah, that like very limited jungle tracking in the early game will go a really long way. So it would be, you know, let's say they started bot side instead, you would want to hug top side, you drop your ward at 2 minutes 30, you know, they clear up, they do their camps, they reset, they go back to base. At that point, you've swapped back to bot side, you drop a ward on bot side, and again, you should be completely safe from anything they can do here. That's how you're going to be safe for the first 5.5 minutes. After that, you're probably going to go for a reset. And so you're going to come out of base, and ideally at this point, you have a pink. And then what you want to do is you want to pink just one side of the river. Normally, this will be the side that your jungler is playing to, but honestly, it can be either side. Like, let's say we want to, I don't know, we pink this bush that's down here, or maybe we pink this bush that's up here. Then we just want to hug to that until we have like trinket wars basically. So we're using this pink to protect us. Like let's say we're just hugging to this. And this is kind of like you're hugging to this because at this point you don't really know where the jungler is. Like they could be anywhere at this point. So we're just hugging to our ward, and then whenever we have a trinket, we would go and like ward a little deeper on the side that our pink is on. So if our pink is here, we might ward this, or like this, or if we have a ton of time, we can even ward this. But alternatively, you know, if this pink is instead on top side and we're hugging towards that, then we'll look to just place our trinkets a bit more aggro, like maybe up here or up here. So if you follow that, I guess to kind of TLDR it, the checklist is 1, find out where the enemy jungle starts at level 1. 2, ward at 230 on the opposite side of the jungler starts, and make sure you're hugging to that all the time. And then 3, swap back to the original side at 4 minutes, ward that, and then hug to that ward. And then after first bait, just place a pink on one side of the river, and just like hug and ward around that from then on. And that's pretty much all you need to know for jungle tracking. Obviously, you can get really advanced with like, you know, counting camps and stuff like that. But honestly, it's just knowing which side the jungler is on and knowing where your ward is and hugging to it. That's going to go pretty much the whole way you need. And again, like I've talked about this really in depth in my previous jungle tracking videos. So if you want, I guess, like more in-depth reasoning, you can go check that. But hopefully this all makes sense. And if it doesn't, just leave a question in the comment section below and I'll be happy to have a look at it. Finally, I'll really quickly cover some of the side lane wards. They haven't really changed a lot, but the same concept from the early game of place a pink kind of shallow and then place your yellow ward a bit deeper still applies to the mid game, and that's going to allow you to ward a lot deeper. So let's say, for example, that this tier 1 is up. If you want to siege this tier 1 on the side lane, what you probably want to do is something like pink this bush, and then you can either ward here or maybe you could ward a little deeper, but let's just say here. So again, somewhat shallow pink, somewhat slightly deeper yellow. So that would be how you take this first tower. After this, if we want to go a bit deeper, like if we want to start playing for this tower, if we want to be able to take enemy krugs and stuff, what you're going to want to do is you're probably going to want to pink this bush, and then you probably place your ward either like, I mean, you can place it over here somewhere. You know, you can place it like right dead in the middle. We could also place it maybe here would be fine. Depends like how much priority you have over mid. The thing is, if you're losing the mid prior, like the enemy bot lane has control, then you might want to place your ward a little shallower, like maybe here so that you can see this path. But basically, it's just you want to place your wards a little bit deeper to allow you to continue to push up. If you're doing this on the bot side, you know what you might want to do. Wait, where did I go? Teleported a dragon somehow. You might want to do is, again, when we're trying to take this tower, maybe pink this bush, ward this bush. When we're starting to push for this tier 2, you know, now we ward this bush, and maybe we're dropping a yellow ward like up here could be good. Even here might be enough, depending on, again, like how much control you have over mid and what kind of dash you have. So side laning warding, it really hasn't changed a whole lot. And again, it just follows the same principle of, if you can, try and make sure you have both a pink and a yellow ward, because that's what's really going to allow you to push up the side lane effectively. And don't like overthink, I guess, like the positions for them. I think the best spots are normally like in these tries to place the wards. But you know, at the end of the day, as long as you've got like some coverage in some area, right? Like you might want to pink, I don't know, this bush, for example, could be enough, or even pinking like this bush could be good. Just make sure you have like coverage to allow yourself to push pretty far out. And if there are holes in your vision, just make sure you respect those while the enemy team is off the map. So I think that's going to be it for this video. Like I said, there's not a ton of changes to the warding, but some of the changes were pretty significant. I think especially the pink ward placement one. So again, if you guys do have any questions at the end of this, please let me know in the comment section below. I'll be happy to reply to them. If you did like the video, go ahead, like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.